Welcome to Being at Home with George. I'm excited about being with you today in this episode. This is the 100th episode. It's been over 2 years of being at home with George during the time of COVID. And I think it's a good time to reflect on these 100 episodes or the 99 prior to today. And I like to think about making the shift from being at home with COVID, trying to cope with it. And as we begin each session, we talk about embracing whatever comes up and at the same time generating hope. And now I love to make the shift to not just surviving and just coping with things, but actually it being Easter Sunday and today being Good Friday and Passover and whatnot. I think of the death and the resurrection, or the end of something and the beginning of something else. And so I want to stay with that frame, that theme of new beginnings, and thinking about what future do I want to live into or move into? What future do we want to move into? And so when I reflect on why I began doing this and why we began doing this, is because we wanted to be a service. We wanted to help with this issue of having this pandemic and the consequences of that, all of the effects of that. And so that was why we started this, is we wanted to be a service and wanted to help. And that's still the focus. The focus is always on, what can we do? How can I serve? How can we serve? And can we serve for the greatest good, not just for our particular tribe or a particular family or whatnot, but for the greatest good. And so I think it's really a good time to really reflect on this idea of, it's not like things are ending, but now it's time to move forward and to think about what kind of a future do we want to live into. So we get to choose that. So we are choosing our future, whether we know it or not. So why not be conscious and intentional about that and choosing to build a future, live into a future where I'm thinking of the quote from Joseph Campbell when he said, "Love is perfect kindness," so that we can be more kind and we can start building and constructing rather than destructing and attacking and being destructive and the opposite of kind. And I'm reminded, I was getting driven to the airport the other day, and I was talking to this man, and we got into a conversation, and once he labeled me as somebody who didn't think like him, his whole demeanor and everything changed. And I could see myself now, instead of having a conversation, it was a lot of meanness and a lot of "I'm right, you're wrong," and being put in a box and not having a conversation. And I think that's important, that we think about the idea that we don't have to agree. We can mean what we say without being mean when we say it, but we have to get back or get to a place where we can agree to disagree and not bring all of this hate and making somebody wrong and then putting them in a box and labeling them. And I think everybody does it to some degree. I think we all do it because the way our nervous system is, sometimes we categorize. And when we do that, it's efficient, but it's not effective. It's not clear. And that's why we talk about creating space between stimulus and response. And what better time to really to reset, renew, reboot, and to begin again, begin from the place of goodness, this place of, yes, we are all connected, and that we have to figure out a way to listen to each other and to be kind to each other and allow the space for people to be different, especially if they're not causing harm to others. That we have to get to this place. And so as we move forward, upon reflection, I think we've been talking about, this embracing and generating hope. Now is a good time, just like the phoenix coming out of the ashes, that we can renew, rebuild in a way where we're living into a future we feel good about, and that we can stop focusing on, this is what's happening, but how do we make these roadblocks into stepping stones? And we do that. The familiar term that you might remember is, we talk about the Hall of Fame, the HOF, the hope, the optimism, and the faith. And we talk about this idea of, yes, let's focus on what we can do. Let's focus on how we can build bridges. And love is perfect kindness, is being kind and just listening to each other. You don't have to agree, but just having people have the opportunity to speak their truth in a way where they felt heard. It's like that seek to understand, then to be understood. And so just this idea of Easter and Passover and death and resurrection, that we can come into an end of COVID or getting in, whether we want to say that, it's still around, but things are the way that they are. So we have to embrace that this is how it is. So we don't have to label it COVID. We just have to figure out how we're going to create a future that we can live into, we want to live into, where we're being kind and we're being productive and we're seeking to build things instead of tearing things down. We're seeking to connect rather than to blame and make others wrong, including ourselves. We have to get beyond that and just get to this idea of let's do this thing called life in a way where we feel good about it. We are establishing connection. We get beyond this illusion of separateness, and we can realize that this is the time of the death and the resurrection, if you want to look at it that way, or even Passover, moving from enslavement to freedom, and that's what's possible for us, and we get to choose. And so what are we choosing? Are we choosing a future that we want to live into, or are we choosing a future where we're continuing to battle and make each other wrong? And if you're in a camp, then I label you and don't even hear what you're saying. It's not a conversation. And it doesn't feel good when people are yelling at each other and no one is hearing what the other one is saying. And it's frustrating because even if you want to listen, if the other person is yelling and not listening to you, then it's frustration because you're not being heard and things are being projected onto you. And it doesn't feel good when people don't even see you. They just project how they think you are. And that doesn't feel good. It feels better when we can just listen to each other and say, yeah, I see how you're seeing it, but I don't agree. And we can agree to disagree agreeably. And so once again, love is perfect kindness. And it would be great if we could start listening to each other, start caring for each other, and start finding the middle way. That's not my way or your way, but a way that we could both find compromise without violating our principles, especially the spiritual principles of love, compassion, kindness, better together, coming from abundance and coming from this idea that win-win or no deal. So happy Easter, Passover, and the death and the resurrection coming up from the ashes as a phoenix, especially with this new Hogwarts movie coming out today on the 15th. It's amazing. And I think the symbol for Dumbledore is the phoenix. And so the phoenix rises from the ashes. So why not rise from the ashes and create something beautiful and amazing?